The South China Sea arbitration was unilaterally initiated by the Philippines, which is a violation of both the bilateral agreement and a promise made in the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea. The move is also an abuse of the dispute settlement mechanism of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and goes against international laws.
The Philippines wants the tribunal to rule maritime rights in the South China Sea are those that are established by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, and 2, the China's dotted line claim in the region. Manila believes the dotted line claim is contrary to the UN Convention. It also says some maritime features that Beijing claims are not islands under the UN Convention, but low tide elevations and are not capable of generating maritime entitlement. But the question is the Philippines misusing international law? China's Foreign Ministry says, according to international law, the entity that enjoys the maritime entitlements is the state that owns the maritime features rather than the maritime features themselves. The UN Convention explicitly grants the maritime entitlements to the coastal states of the maritime zones in question. In addition to that, Beijing says, apart from state sovereignty, the first step must be a preliminary decision on who that coastal state is. Otherwise, discussing legal status is meaningless. Beijing also says whether low tide elevations are subject to occupation is a question of territorial sovereignty, and that's beyond the scope of the UN Convention.
China and the Philippines originally reached consensus to settle disputes over the South China Sea through negotiation. And this consensus is in accordance with the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, known as the DOC, signed by China and ASEAN member states, including the Philippines, in 2002. However, on January the 23rd, 2013, the Philippines unilaterally initiated the arbitration in violation of its agreement with China. And now, the question is, can this arbitration be fair? The DOC explicitly states that the parties concerned undertake to resolve disputes on territorial and jurisdictional disputes by peaceful means through friendly negotiations and consultations by sovereign states directly concerned, in accordance with universally recognized principles of international law, including the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The convention allows for exclusion to arbitration, and in 2006, China made a declaration excluding disputes over maritime delimitation, historic bay or titles, military activities, and law enforcement activities. The Philippines went ahead with arbitration without any consultations or negotiations with China. The Philippines went back on its word, and not only that, but is conveniently ignoring the key part of the convention's settlement procedure. The arbitration can't be fair because illegal.
早在秦汉时期中国人民就在南海呢开始自己的航行活动。根据目前所见史料，最晚到东汉时期，中国人民呢就已经对南海呢有了命名。这个命名呢就叫长海齐头，而长海这个词就是中国古人对南海最早的称谓。那么到了宋代，中国人民对于南海不同地区、不同岛礁的认知更加的清晰。所以在宋代文献里边出现了石塘、长沙这两个名字。类似这样的地图和文献呢，就有上百种之多。那么在古代历史时期呢，中国人民对于南海的开发和经营，主要体现在航路的开辟和渔业生产活动这两个方面。早在汉代，中国人民就开辟了从我国沿海地区经过西沙海域、南沙海域，通往东南亚地区的海上之路。那么这就是大家都知道的海上丝绸之路。而在相当长的时间里边，中国人民是这个海上丝绸之路上最重要的甚至是唯一的这个航行者。正是基于中国人民最早发现、最早命名、最早开发经营的基础上那么最晚到了唐宋时期，中国政府开始对南海实施行政管辖那么在设置行政管辖的宋代又设置了水师。那么水师实施巡视南海，这个执行守卫这个南海的这样一个任务而到了明清时期，水师巡视南海、守卫海疆的这样一个任务呢，形成制度，并且日益规范。基于上述大量的历史事实和基于充分确凿的历史文献，我们可以 这样认为啊，在中国自古以来对于南海诸岛拥有主权和相关权利，历史事实是充分的，历史证据是确凿的啊。那么中国对南海诸岛的主权的这样一个立场也是不可。
黄岩岛的主权是建立在最新发现、最新命名和有效管辖和实际控制的基础之上的。中国发现黄岩岛最早可以追溯到13世纪初的这个元代，民国以来，我们对南海诸岛，包括黄岩岛在内的，有过3次的命名。1935年的命名黄岩岛，1947年黄岩岛命名为民主礁，1983年中国地名委员会命名黄岩岛，同时把它的复名定为民主礁。中国发现了黄岩岛之后，应该说黄岩岛一直处于中国的实际控制和管辖之下。另外，黄岩岛附近海域也是中国渔民的传统的作业渔场。菲律宾对黄岩岛的企图或者说非分之想始于最早1997年，当时菲律宾这个派遣了海军登上黄岩岛，摧毁了黄岩岛上的中国设立的主权碑和其他设施。那么当然中国采取了相应的措施，那么驱离了菲律宾的武装人员。那么菲律宾在2009年的时候又通过领海基信法案，把它非法侵占的南沙群岛的部分岛礁和黄岩岛纳入它的领土范围。其实我们要看一看相关的史料和地图，就不难发现黄岩岛根本不属于菲律宾的。菲律宾的领土范围是由3个国际条约决定的。第一个是1898年的巴黎条约，第二是1900年的美西华盛顿条约，第3个条约是1930年的美英条约。那这3个条约就已经明确界定了菲律宾的国土范围。那么菲律宾国土的范围第西边的边界线，也就是东经118度线。那么无论是黄岩岛还是其他南沙群岛，都是位于这条线以西，显然不属于菲律宾的领土。所以从这个意义上讲，这个黄岩岛这个属于中国的这个领土范围，那是无可争议的。菲律宾对黄岩岛的这个非分之想是没有任何根据的，是非法的。
Maritime boundaries are the key disputes in the South China Sea issue. The dotted or the 9-dash line is the basis for China's claims in the South China Sea. China stands by its indisputable sovereignty, saying it's based on historical evidence. Our reporter Han Bin explains what the dotted line means.
The dotted or 9-dash line is the cornerstone of China's sovereignty claims. The South China Sea is a semi-enclosed sea connecting the Pacific and Indian Oceans. It's dotted with numerous island features which fall into 4 island groups, namely, they are the Nansha Islands or the Spratly in the far south, the Xisha Islands or the Parasols in the west, and the Dongsha Islands or the Pratas in the northeast, and the Zhongsha Islands or the Macclesfield Bank and Scarborough Shore east of the Xishas. With a number of countries bordering each other, it's not surprising that disputes would arise. And the disputes have been further complicated by the UN Convention with a 200 nautical mile zone, resulting in overlapping claims. The 9-dash line delimits the ownership of both the features and historic waters. It indicates China's claims of sovereignty of all the islands and reefs within the line and its historical rights of fishing, navigation and exploitation. For a long time, the country has kept a low profile about what the 9-dash line means so as to avoid conflicts and resolve the disputes through negotiations.
Tensions in the South China Sea region continue. China continues to insist on a dual-track approach to resolve disputes. This is governed by the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea made in 2002 between China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which China says the Philippines has violated. In an exclusive interview with CCTV's Wang Hui, spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry Lu Kang explained more about China's solution for solving disputes.
There was no dispute over the sovereign claims over those islands and reefs and nearby waters in South China Sea until the mid-1970s. But even ever since the 1970s, when there was some different claims over those islands and reefs, you know that the then Chinese leaders have already proposed that maybe we should take the approach which means that set aside the differences while focus on joint cultivation or joint development. This has been a very wise idea, and for quite a few years, I mean for decades of years, it was also agreed by those relevant countries, relevant parties in this region. That has been a successful approach in our idea. Alongside the development, China and ASEAN countries sat down together and worked out the DOC, which and explicitly said that sovereign disputes could be solved and should be solved by those directly related parties themselves. And also in the DOC, China and all the ASEAN countries have decided that they should work together to cultivate more cooperation that could serve the interests of ourselves. That's no problem. Recent years, because of the so-called rebalancing policy by the United States, you know that you could see some kind of tensions in this region. In recent months, some ASEAN countries also proposed what we call the dual-track approach, which means, on the one hand, those different opinions or disputes over the sovereign claims by relevant parties, those differences should be solved by the directly related parties themselves. On the other hand, China and ASEAN countries should work together to preserve the peace, stability, and prosperity in this region. That also goes in line with the principle and the spirits of DOC.